We're going to get started for real now, everybody. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Hutchins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and this is our program, MANP Connects. We started MANP Connects during the lockdown of 2020 in an effort to provide quick, fast information to nonprofits across the state. And we quickly realized that even in addition to needing basic information of what was going on, we also realized is that we needed each other, that we needed to have a sense of being in it together, and that everyone was swimming in all the questions and wringing their hands around what to do. Well, guess what? We still are in a lot of ways. What we also realized is that as the immediate emergency abated and we were able to better understand where we were, what we were up against, we realized then that we started recognizing shared issues that we had that have continued. Things like workforce, things like leadership succession, like we're going to talk about today, things like government contracts and how to navigate the crazy world of receiving government funding, all kinds of issues that we all as nonprofits across the state, whether very small in terms of budget and being all volunteer led, all the way up to the biggest nonprofits that we have in the state, we have a commonality, and that shared commonality is just finding solutions to shared problems together as people who are committed to strengthening our communities. That's our public benefit shared purpose together. And guess what? When you're in that space, you end up having a lot in common, and you have a lot of ways that you want to link arms and figure out better ways to do things. And that's what this space is about, is finding out who in this state you can link arms with. And I'm just so proud of the team at MANP that we've come up with a program called MANP Connects, where once a month, I sign on a Friday morning from 9 to 9:45, just really quick opportunity to touch base and to meet the people who are in this community, linking arms to make Maine a better space. So welcome, welcome. Today's program is being recorded. We'll make the audio recordings available in the coming weeks. You know, please mute yourselves if you can, turn off your camera, use the chat box, please. If you've been to MANP Connects before, you'll learn quickly that the chat box is a very, very popular place. Not that I'm a little bit, old school when it comes to it, because it's like passing notes when the teacher's speaking. Oh, Janet's nodding. She's like, yeah. We used to get in trouble back in the 80s when you would pass notes, but now chat box, everybody's okay with it. Okay, anyway, sorry, that's my little diversion for this morning. Anyway, today we've realized that we have stumbled upon, not surprisingly, a very popular topic, and that is leadership succession. I'm sure everyone who's tuning in today has heard about the Great Resignation, or the Great Transition, some of us would prefer to call, in terms of the pandemic really opened up a lot of questions for a lot of people about what they're doing, how they're spending their time, where they're best, where they need to go, and where they want to be. And in addition, we have these workforce issues in terms of many of you have written in to say employee retention is the top of your list, employee recruitment's at the top of your list. So we're going to be here. We're going to continue MANP Connects through 2023. We're going to be continuing to bring people who are grappling with these issues every month related to all of these different topics. But today we have three leaders. We're going to be starting with Gilda Nardone and Janet Smith from New Ventures, Maine, and I hope they're going to join me on camera. In the meantime, our sponsors are Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Wipfli. Wipfli has a great tool that we'll tell you at the end that they use with their clients around succession planning. So both those are really great sponsors of ours, and they're really engaged in this work too. And then Maine Biz is also a sponsor. Good morning, Gilda and Janet.
Good morning.
Hi, Gilda. Can I want to take 1 minute to brag about the two of you for just 1 second. I know. Yeah, I know. You can take it, Gilda. Come on. All right. this is my brag. Well, first of all, many of you, I'm sure Gilda is not is somebody you've heard about. She's been in the nonprofit sector, and she started with New Ventures Maine in 1978. And I think this line, Gilda, pretty much says it all about how awesome you are. So here it is, everybody. Listen to this. Gilda guided the organization in its establishment as, wait for it, displaced homemakers, beginning in 1978 as it grew into Maine Centers for Women Work and Community. Yay! And then it finally became New Ventures Maine in 2015. If that doesn't say it all about the incredible work Gilda has done to bring this organization forward, I don't know what else does. So welcome, Gilda. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah. And then Janet is right next to her literally on my camera. She's right over there. And she joined New Ventures Maine in 2001. She is also a passionate person for economic equality and the rights of all women and marginalized communities to have access to economic solutions. And I loved reading about the fact that you designed, developed, and implemented New Ventures Rainy Day Savings Program, and you've been leading the Cash Maine statewide activities. Janet, you are also quite a remarkable person. So thank you for being here, both of you. I'm really honored that you'd be willing to spend a few minutes with me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I want to mention, everybody, is that this is definitely a popular topic, and MANP is here to provide you with many, many resources. We have a new website. Shh, don't tell anybody, it's soft launch phase. But Kelly's going to be putting in a bunch of links while we're talking over this time, and you can always learn more. I want to acknowledge right off the bat that the people who I'm going to be talking with today are examples of very well-planned successions. And so I'm sure many of you are going to be listening and going to be thinking, well, yeah, sure, Gilda knew she was going to retire in 1978. I mean, she's been planning this for years. But and so I recognize that some of you may not be in that same situation, and we have lots of materials about that. But today we're going to be focusing on people who have been very mindful about how to transition from a really strong embedded leader to a new one. And so that's really the nature of it, what we're going to be talking about today. But I also want to offer to all of you out there, especially because this can be a sensitive time for people. You may be in a position where either you personally or someone you know is considering it and isn't really sure how much you want to talk about it and with whom you want to talk about it. And so I just want to offer right now to anybody who's listening who might be in that case, that if you have a quick question and you don't really want to share it in chat, you can choose the function of just chatting directly to Kelly, who's my partner with this program. She produces it, and she can help you with quick questions. Or we also have Molly O'Connell, who is our one of the masterminds behind our help desk, and she's on the call today too. And you could search for her name too. And so if you would like to, bottom line is, if you would like to ask a confidential question to someone on the MANP team, we're here for you. Okay, great. All right, thank you for letting me do that little message there. So Gilda, how did the pandemic, when did you start planning? And I'm pretty sure you told me that the pandemic definitely impacted it. How did that come about?
Well, we started planning actually when our colleague, Eloise Vitelli, now Senator Vitelli, decided to retire. She and I had shared leadership of the organization over many years. And because of our and other staff's longevity, we've experienced those rolling retirements over many years. We knew it was important to make sure that informations and systems were in place so that we could ensure a smooth transition. So the planning process has gone on for a long time. The pandemic sort of extended that process because it didn't feel right for me to leave in the middle of a crisis for ours and other organizations. And we were dealing with how we restructured our way we provide services. So it didn't feel like the right time to leave. But after that, we were able to move forward with that process.
And how did you, the first thing I think about, Gilda, is, well, I've had a hard time understanding when the crisis ended. So has it ended? Is it over? I'm just really curious. I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody who's really wondering. So Gilda, did you guys set a deadline for yourselves, or did you just kind of know when you knew? How did you know when you're like, okay, this COVID crisis we have a handle on it enough that we can get back to transition?
Good question. I think we set a timeline and then we ended up extending it a little longer. So I actually left at the end of last year. So the transition's been almost a year now. And I think it really, and it was going on in the background, but it wasn't the focus of our work. Sort of responding to COVID was the focus. But I think the important thing for us in terms of having a succession plan was it was a blueprint for us of what we needed to do to make sure things were in order. And it also kept me and others accountable because we shared that plan with our key stakeholders, including our management team, some of whom are on the call today, as well as our advisory council and other partners and stakeholders. So I think having the plan, even though it was put in kind of in the background, we kept moving forward with the areas that were critical for us in the plan. And I think each organization's plan will look different, but for us, a couple of key areas were fund development and financial management, making sure, it was important to me to feel like the organization was in solid financial shape before I transitioned. And the other key area for us was human resource and leadership development. Again, primarily focused on our management team, but also our advisory council and other key partners. So I think even though the deadline got extended a little further, we kept working on elements of the plan, even through the pandemic, although it was on the back burner at that point.
I can't remember in terms of when did you actually announce a search process beginning? Had that happened before the pandemic? I'm actually not remembering now.
No, that was
Okay.
after.
You didn't have to pause a search process, in other words.
Yes.
Okay.
In the meantime, what we did do was, as positions opened up, we took time to really think about what does the organization need moving forward. And that was some new skills and capabilities. And so with a couple of new positions, we laid the groundwork for my transition. In the winter of 2021, I started, my job description hadn't been revised for many years. So that was the first process to look at the job description and to have conversations again with staff and with our advisory council around what were the skills and qualities and attributes that they wanted in a new leader. And that laid the groundwork then for the search, which happened over the summer in 2021. And Janet actually was the final candidate and joined officially in the new role November 1st. And we had a couple of months of transition, which I think was, I would really recommend if it's possible to have that. Janet came from within the organization, which for us, I think was a great selection. Personally, I feel that, but for the organization as well. But I think what we also realized is her moving up then created a leadership vacuum in all of the work that she was doing in her previous. So that, I think if there was anything that we would have loved to have was even more time, but at some point I needed to step away and Janet needed to move forward with communicating and implementing her vision.
Yeah, great. And so Janet, now's your chance. Did it really go that smoothly?
I would say yes. The things that were definitely a big help was the fact that the organization was in good financial shape. So I wasn't having to worry about, are people going to get paid? We've continued to move forward, applying for grants and, kind of the fundraising as usual stuff, but there wasn't an emergency or, a hole that needed to be filled. And I think what, that as Gilda mentioned, coming in as an existing staff member, I knew all the staff, I knew the organization very well. And, I probably should have planned for my own transition from the things that I was leading, because I think one thing we didn't predict was this particular hiring climate that I've walked into, and how hard it is to replace, the staff that we need to replace right now. And that forces me and others to have to continue to take on other responsibilities until we can fill some positions.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me to listen to the two of you talk, and you're identifying areas that hiring from within, there are opportunities and challenges that are unique to that circumstance, right? As you mentioned, the two of you were on the payroll together for 2 months, right? And that may not work quite as well with someone who's coming in from outside, who needs to acclimate to a new culture, who needs to get to know everyone, right? And that get to know process can be challenging, not necessarily because it's not necessarily because the two people involved are anything wrong with them, but it can just be hard to be the brand new person in a new space and trying to fit into that culture. So you had that on the one hand, but as you said, Janet, then maybe what you didn't quite predict as much is the fact that you would have to be reorienting your role within the organization, and that was going to create a different type of gap on the other end of things, right? And so that's a really interesting point. We talk a lot at MANP and in our resources about cultivating leadership from within. And Gilda, you talked about that the other thing that you were very mindful of is cultivating leadership so that you wanted financial strength before you left, and you wanted a bench strength, if you will, right? So key, and we talk about that a lot. And that solution that you might choose as an organization presents a different set of challenges and opportunities that are important to pay attention to. Janet, can you tell me what's a lesson learned for you, or what's something that stands out for you through all of this, that if you were, with the benefit of hindsight, and there might be people out there that are just starting down this journey, do you have any words of wisdom for them?
Well, I would say, the opportunities that I had within the organization to build my leadership skills were very important, and I would point to the leadership of Cash as one of the main things, because Cash was a major program, is a major program that we lead, and it had a lot of pieces that helped me build my leadership skill, including relationships with funders, relationships with the legislature and advocacy, program innovation and program improvement, data collection, all of that. It was, within that one program. So I learned a lot and developed a lot through leading that, as well as, made some really strong national connections that also helped me build those skills. And then participating in, some leadership development programs. Things like, I was a John T. Gorman Fellow, which was, an amazing experience, and very helpful, in this transition. And years ago, I participated in Leadership Maine. And as you know, Jennifer, now I'm in the MANP Leadership Initiative. So all of those things have provided me with different pieces to help with this leadership transition.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. That's great. A shout out for as part of succession planning. If you're a board member on this call and you're thinking about succession planning, this is what we're talking about when we say nonprofits need professional development invested in their staff as well. And there are ways to do it that it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to break the bank, right? And Leadership Maine is a great program, and there are all different types of programs out there that are really good for cultivating that. So I could talk to you guys forever, but I have another famous nonprofit leader that I want to talk to you. But before, I want to touch on one thing though, Gilda. You guys are structured a little bit differently, but your advisory council acts as sort of a de facto board of directors, correct? And they had a key role in this succession planning. And can you just touch a base a little bit on the importance of the people who served on that council and what they committed, the time and energy they put into this, and how important that was?
They were critical partners, and one of them is on this call right now. They really were fully engaged throughout the process. I think particularly in thinking through what they saw was needed for a new leader, and served as members of the search committee, met with Janet after she was selected as the final candidate, and have continued to support her in her transition. So they really stepped up, not only in this area, but also in the fund development area as well. So they were contributing to the overall succession plan in addition to supporting this aspect of that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I cut you?
One last thing I would add before when we transition to Shawn is, it is a process of change and transition. And even though we all have been dealing with that, particularly through the pandemic, it's important, I think, to remember that there is some loss and individuals respond differently to that. So people had to be willing to let go of me as well as me letting go in order to create space for the new leader to come in. And people handle that process differently, but I think it's important to remember that it is change and transition. And you can plan for it, but it also includes an emotional aspect. So.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that, Gilda.
Yeah.
Is there something that helped you in that process that made sure that you were focused on your self-care around that? Did you take more walks in the woods, or did you read a book that was really inspiring?
Well, mostly after I left, I gardened this summer, and that was really helpful.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that we did do that other staff helped with was we had a party at the end and really transitioned from me to Janet. We borrowed a technique from our colleagues at Four Directions around gifting each other something that was symbolic of the transition. So I think all of that, any ways that everyone involved can recognize the change is really helpful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for that, Gilda. I love that. In our society where I personally don't feel like we have enough ceremony, and ceremony as in celebration and acknowledgement of all the feelings that come up with change, right? I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I feel like I need to go do that right now. Makes me feel better about transitioning into the weekend, I think.
Yes.
Thank you both. I could talk to you forever. And I want Shawn to join me on the screen now. Thanks,
Right.
Janet. Thanks,
Thank
Gilda.
you.
Have a great
Thank
weekend.
you.
Hi, Shawn. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Really good. So tell us, you've been listening to this. How did your transition come about? In a similar way to
Well,
Gilda or different?
So I started at Community Concepts 7 years ago, and I went into the job hoping that it was going to be my last job. And so I really, began thinking about transition actually before I started. What's it going to look like? I also was commuting 90 minutes one way a day to my job. So I was sort of walking into the community of Western Maine, Lewiston, Auburn area, and then driving home at night. So I was in a kind of a weird place because I came in and the previous CEO had stepped down 9 months before, and the board, and I think it was a good decision, brought in an interim. So the interim was on board when I got there and had been in the job for 9 months. So my transition into the job was probably not the same as most people's, in that they didn't have a warm handoff from the previous leader, in the sense of someone that had been leading the program. Certainly the interim led, but it was more of a caretaker, and so it was a little bit different. So my plan was always sometime between now and 2024, and working remotely during COVID at my lakeside place and not commuting really got me thinking about, how long I wanted to continue to do the commute and, how best to use my time. We were doing board development for a long time when I first came, because anyone that goes through a tough transition as a board, you lose people. They burn out because they carry a lot of water while they're helping to lead the organization through a transition, particularly one that wasn't planned necessarily. And so just before COVID, and actually we finalized our board recruitment in February of whatever it was, pre-COVID. And we had our strongest recruiting group as a board. We had a 50% increase in our board, and we had 8 new board members. And so the board members came on in June, and tragically we lost our incoming board member, Paul Gavro, who died suddenly in April of that year, and he was going to be taking the helm in June. So that was really pretty disruptive for us. It was an incredible loss. Paul, for those that don't know, was a longtime public servant, worked in the Attorney General's office, was a legislator, and just a great man. And so we had to pivot really, really fast around that, try to build a board, collaboration, all virtually. I think we had one face-to-face meeting in the summer of the first year of COVID, and it was maybe half the people chose to come. And so that was really, really difficult. And so as COVID went on and my plans got more firm, it's like, okay, we really need to activate transition and be ready for recruitment. And one of the things that the biggest takeaway I can offer is transition and recruitment are 2 distinctly different activities that, while they're related, they're not at all connected in the sense of one impacting the other. And so we're a NeighborWorks organization. We're one of 5 in Maine. And one of the requirements of NeighborWorks is that you have transition planning for all your key leadership, not just the CEO. And so that was, that was in my mind from the beginning. And so during COVID, we were dealing with so many crises. We added 100 people the first year and a half of COVID. So we were adding people, we were dealing with the recruitment issue. So we were, all focused on just meeting the needs of the community. And so when I finally set the date and kind of forced the issue, then they moved into doing board recruitment. But there's more than just posting an ad, as you know. It's a good time to do a reset for the organization. Were the skills that they were looking for and attributes that they were looking for when they hired me the same ones that are needed going forward? And so there's a process involved in that, and not everybody on the board, I think it's pretty typical, plays equal roles in that. You have a core group, usually the executive team or others, that are really doing the heavy lifting, right, on that whole process. You can't have too many people around the table, but you need to have everybody invested in where the organization's going. So we really pushed it hard starting, I want to say, in January of this year, which it should have been sooner. And it's not a criticism of the board. It's just what we were dealing with, and the timing of it all made it difficult.
So, Shawn, I want to ask, I want to pause there for 1 second. There's so much stuff to talk about. It's a little overwhelming. So first of all, I want to reassure myself and the MANP team and everybody on the call that we have other MANP Connects where we can dive into more of this. And so first of all, that pause too, I do want to take just a couple of minutes before we close today. If there's anybody on the call who wants to add something, one of the aspects of MANP Connects is that it's about peer learning, right? We can get the most out of hearing the stories of how our colleagues are dealing with these issues. And so if there's someone on the Zoom today and they want to chat to Kelly and let her know that you would love to pop in and share a key learning in a transition that you might be involved in or have been involved in, please, I invite you to do that. So just that note that. Shawn, back to you. I think, because you've announced, Community Concepts now has announced a new leader.
Yes.
Right? Jim Martin.
Jim Martin will be the new CEO starting at the beginning of the year.
He's coming over from Sweetser.
Yes.
And so talk about this idea of bringing in someone. I mentioned it when I was talking to Gilda and Janet. You know, they chose a leader from within. In this case, Community Concepts is bringing someone from another Maine nonprofit. Talk a little bit about how in your planning with the board, you're thinking about, will you have any interaction with Jim when he comes in? How is that going to work?
So the original plan was that I was going to step down at the end of June and have the summer to sort of enjoy all that is Maine and many, many new grandchildren that I've been blessed with. And then I would come back after Labor Day and help onboard the new CEO. The timing of that didn't play out in that way. And they actually hired like in the last 3 weeks. So Jim and I have met virtually a couple of times and planned to do that. And the plan was that I would, depending on the needs of the final candidate, the person selected, we would then, sort of tailor it to that. Jim and I know each other really well, and we actually went through the Gorman Fellowship in the same cohort group. And he comes from a similar background, child welfare background that I had. So Jim and I have been talking a couple of times a week now, and probably after the Thanksgiving holiday, we'll probably get together a little bit face to face. But one of the things that I do want to say that I think is different, maybe because we were a larger organization, but we had a pretty strong executive team. So the COO, Mary Rita Reinhardt, actually stepped in and did interim over the summer. And she always was really the sort of inwardly facing person. She sort of ran the programs and did all of that. And I was the public facing person, sitting at tables, collaborating, working with, funders and things like that, and building community collaborations. So the day-to-day operations probably didn't change a whole lot with me stepping back. And then not knowing who was coming in. I've been sort of continuing to represent Community Concepts, with the state and at tables, trying to figure out how best to transition, not assuming that the membership that we have at those tables is a guarantee, and not want to be presumptuous that, yeah, whoever comes in is going to be able to take my seat at those tables, not because they're not capable, but because those boards and collaborations, have something to say about their membership. So it's sort of trying to walk that awkward line of keeping community concepts engaged and relevant in the community during this time, and giving the community confidence that we're not going to miss a beat, that we're going to continue to deliver on services. We're not going to wait on making decisions that require decisions today because Jim's coming next week or whatever. And so it is a dance, and it does require, I think, really, really clear communications and transparency with the community. Because the other thing that, and I wasn't aware that these things happen, I guess, a little bit naive. I think there was when people heard that I was leaving, I think there was some, probably thinking among larger organizations, well, maybe this is the time that Community Concepts would look to merge with somebody.
Interesting. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. And I tried all along to make sure that this was all coming from a place of strength and confidence for the community, and not something that just because I'd made a decision to move on in my life. I'm old, and I've got other things that I want to do, particularly with my family, that it wasn't anything that I was running from. I loved the job. I loved the work. Maybe I wish I'd found it a few years earlier. But I've always been blessed to have jobs that I really believe in, that make a difference, I like to think. And so, I think every organization is a little bit different. You got to keep operating, right? And your employees and the community has expectations, and we have to meet those expectations. And sometimes that means a dance that you do, and I don't say that lightly, but of, not committing Jim to things that he needs to come in and decide for himself, but also not becoming irrelevant during this transition period as an organization.
In hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I think I would have pushed the board to really make it a point to really not just talk about transition, but put things in place around transition that they had ready when the time was right, rather than wait till the time is here. And now we're doing that. Well, who's going to be on the,
what? You mean like a plan, or?
Yeah, like a plan, like, okay, what would you do? What's the best way? Do we build a transition? Do we build a transition where we do have an interim plan and have some distance between Shawn leaving on Friday and the new CEO beginning on Monday? I think there's benefits to doing it that way, but I think there's also challenges. And with not knowing who the candidates were going to be, it was hard to, you kind of had to just, I spent a lot of time talking with the chair of the board, who I have a really good relationship with. He actually was the city manager that hired me in Bangor 20 years ago. So Ed and I go way back, and he was the city administrator in Lewiston. So he and I were constantly talking about, okay, how do we do this? Do you want me to sit at this table? What do you want me to represent? Should we go ahead and move forward with closing down a program that we've decided isn't in our future, or add new programs? And so it really is about being transparent and having honest, candid relationships, and go from there.
I'm so glad you said that, Shawn. And it's, I often say to people that relationship between an executive director and board chair, for me, is critical to establishing the trust and transparency and setting up a supportive culture, both among the staff, a trusting, supportive culture among staff, as well as the board. And I think when organizations come to us and they feel a little bit like they can't quite, there's something not quite right in terms of communication and culture, I always start with that relationship. Thank you.
One of the questions that was asked, Jennifer, I think is important. I didn't have an official role in the selection of my replacement. I did have an unofficial role because, and maybe it's because I've been around a while and I'm connected to a lot of people. I had so many people call me, sort of dipping their toe in the water. Do I want to apply? And asking for my advice, opinion, information to help them make their decision. And certainly the ones that I was excited were applying, I shared that with Ed. I don't know if Ed was even on the search committee, but I wanted to let him know that I was getting these calls and letting him know what I was sharing. And then, there were some people, I wasn't as encouraging maybe for them to apply, but obviously it's a personal choice. So I wasn't going to sit there and, say, oh no, you'd never do this job. And so it was a little bit of, just being a support to someone, answering questions so they could decide whether they wanted to throw their hat in the ring or not.
Okay, great. Thank you. Brenda, join us. I hear you have a question or a comment or just want to say hi. Are you there? Brenda asked a good question in chat. Hi.
Hi, all. Thank you for doing this. And I just wanted to say, if anybody wants to start an interim director support group, I'm on. And I would love, I definitely am going to connect with you, Shawn, to talk about your experience coming in after an interim. I'm currently the interim at Cultivating Community. We've just launched our search for the executive director. Woohoo! I've been here for about 1.5 years, and I've always felt my role is to make sure I set up the next leader for success. And what struck me, Shawn, when you said that, pushing the board more to actually do more than talk about it, just actually put things into place. We are working right now, me and my co-director, Roberto Rodriguez, with the staff to sort of plan the onboarding process once somebody's on board. And I'd love to hear sort of, if that's what you were talking about, that sort of building that plan, and hear what your thoughts are about what should be included in that plan.
So it's that, and then part of it, and this, I don't know if I'm going to be really, really clear about this. It's the implications throughout the organization. We have a couple of subsidiaries at Community Concepts, and I play a leadership role there. And some of the executive team isn't a part of that. It's sort of a capital adventure kind of thing, our finance corporation. And so, not everybody on the executive team had intimate knowledge of those things. So trying to make sure that nothing gets lost in the process, and that people that are having extra work put upon them during a transition understand it clearly, and that they're set up to succeed, is really, really important. And I think that can only happen by sitting and having conversations across the table. What about this? What about that? Because, one person I don't think can think of everything, and a lot of it's organic. It's not. There isn't a policy manual to answer some of these questions, and so trying to create that situation and support people, because if there's internal candidates, then, what's that do during that time if that's known? And then how's that going to impact me if I work for that person, or if I'm also competing? It really needs to be sensitive. And, with me not being there, with us being mostly remote, and with the board certainly not being there, I think COVID presented a lot of different water cooler conversations that didn't happen at the water cooler that anyone could see, but were happening virtually with text messages and stuff. So I think it was hard probably for everybody to get a sense of how everyone was feeling in the organization. We have a little over 300 employees, and many of them I wouldn't even recognize. I have to say, they worked remotely. They worked at Head Starts across the Western Maine. And so I didn't know everybody. So me leaving wasn't a particular issue for probably most of our staff. They didn't see me day to day. I wasn't that important. But obviously, running and keeping the organization going and receiving funding and all those things are important to all of them for their jobs. So I think in maybe the next 6 months, I'll have time to reflect on how we might have done it differently, but that is a challenge. And I think it's different when you have everybody in the same office and you can yell down the hall and they're all right there. And like I said, there were some people I saw once a year, maybe.
Thank you, Shawn. I really appreciate it. I want to be really mindful that I'm up to time, but how many people want to continue this conversation and recognize, put in chat, whether or not you think this is something that we need to keep doing. You can put it in chat or you can raise your hand, give us a thumbs up. I'd like to know if you would come back and talk about this some more from different aspects. One of the aspects that we didn't even touch upon, this was focused on CEOs. What about board transition? What about key staff? You know, Janet leaving her position and moving into a leadership role. Do you want to talk about this some more? Well, great. We have in December is our last MAMP Connects. I see so many hands. This is awesome. And so we will continue these conversations and we will continue these conversations into 2023. We're so glad you were here with us today. Thanks again to our sponsors, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, Maine Biz, and Whipfly, which uses, I mentioned that they have a tool that they use. I'm inviting Devin and/or Kelly to put that tool that Whipfly uses to help organizations with their leadership succession. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. Come back in December and all through 2023, we will keep bringing you these topics. I wish I had more time to delve into it, but let's just consider this our thought moment for the weekend, and we'll get back into it with all of you. Come back. So good to see you. Have a great weekend. Have an awesome holiday, and I'll see you in December. Bye.